Hi guys, welcome to another episode of The Amanda Show. And on this episode today, we have the amazing Obgeni Adémola, and we'll be discussing Pan-Africanism, especially in today's world where we are living in. We are talking about the multipolar world and things are completely changing with global affairs. So I have none other than the amazing Obgeni Adémola to discuss Pan-Africanism and why Africa needs to work together at this time. So, Mr. Adémola, can you tell us about yourself and where people can find you?
Well, I'm Adémola. Adémola is fine. And I'm a political commentator. I'm a journalist, and I'm also an accountant. Really, it's very people ask me how am I put journalism and accountancy together. I think it's just two personalities, really. So I think one is passion, one is profession, right? So it's very important that we take this message to the nooks and crannies of Africa. This message of enlightenment, this message of education, this message of just making people self-aware, about the African pride. You can find me on the internet at Adémola, and I've written a couple of articles. Just by Google search, you see the links online.
Okay, so let's get into it so that we don't take much of your time. The first question I want to ask you is, what is Pan-Africanism? What does it mean to you? And how can you explain the relevance of Pan-Africanism in today's world?
Yeah, we can trace the intellectual history of Pan-Africanism to about 100 years ago. We had very amazing intellectual giants like Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who really laid the ideological foundation for Pan-Africanism. So Marcus Garvey, with his ideology, Garveyism, later influenced people like Malcolm X, influenced people like Nkrumah, that now, give us scientific socialism and Pan-Africanism as an ideology in a political state. But Pan-Africanism, in a very layman way, is the understanding that I see every African in myself. We have to understand that the Pan-Africanism should be an antithesis to Pan-Europeanism, because we live in a world where Pan-Europeanism is a thing. People don't look at it that Pan-Europeanism is a thing. Even after we have Europeans who sailed all the way from Spain and Portugal in 1492 and sailed to America, genocided the indigenous people, they are still white people. They're still Caucasian. They're still white people who can trace their history to Europe. So regardless of that, regardless of that border that we were in the American continent or in the European continent, we can still see this kind of synergy. The oneness in whiteness. The oneness and whiteness, regardless of whether you're a white man from Spain, from Ukraine, you're a white man regardless of where you are, a white man is protected regardless of anywhere he is by a question of his skin. So why should we, who have been victims of Pan-Europeanism, because we've been victims of Pan-Europeanism, Europeans were so united that they sat down at the Berlin Conference in 1884 and partitioned Africa amongst themselves. What kind of unity is that? We have to look at these things. We have to understand these things. They sat down before the Berlin Conference, chaired by Otto von Bismarck. Europeans were busy fighting each other. They were fighting themselves over which territory of Africa should be looted, which territory of Africa should be occupied. And nobody came together, sat down at the Berlin Conference, and they were like, "Oh, you France colonized this place. Oh, you Britain colonized this place." So that unity still exists in this 21st century. You can see, regardless of what is happening in Ukraine, we see the American government, Germany, still continues to supply weapons to the government in Ukraine. Look at what's happening in Israel. They don't see Israel as they see Israel as a Western outpost. So regardless of, you have to understand that the white man doesn't care. The white man doesn't see us as Nigerian, Ghanaian, Mozambican. He sees us as Africans. He's a black man. You're an African to an average white man, whether you are from North America in Haiti, for the fact that you have the black skin, for the fact that you are carrying the black skin, you are a victim. You are inevitably going to be. You are already a victim of this globalist white supremacist world that we are in today. So Pan-Africanism is a intellectual response, right, and a political response to stimuli. And what is the stimuli? Colonialism, imperialism that still exists in the world of today. So I see every African in myself, whether you're South African, Egyptian, Moroccan. I see every African in myself, and I think this understanding is going to change and repair the African continent of today.
What you said is this is the first time someone has actually put it this way for me. No, as you were talking, it just occurred to me now what is going on in the Trump administration, where they're accusing South Africa, the government of South Africa, of treating the white population of South Africa really bad, right?
Yeah.
And even a few days ago, what's his name? Tucker Carlson had someone on his show, and they were talking about the maltreatment of white South Africans. And for me, it's that unity, like you said, the unity among, shall I say, the white race, whether it's in Israel or whether it's in South Africa or whether it's in the United States or somewhere in Europe, that unity. So you put it very correctly, and I've not heard anyone explain it like this. So thank you for that. Now let's get to the second question. Now you mentioned a few people. You mentioned Marcus Garvey, you mentioned Kwame Nkrumah, you also mentioned Malcolm X. But are there any other, would I say, figures or historical movements that have shaped the Pan-Africanism movement? Like any other historical figure or movement that has shaped Pan-Africanism as we have it today?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of Africans who have championed the Pan-African movement before we were born. So, like I said, our elders they've already given us the political blueprint. They've given us the political blueprint upon which we are supposed to build an equitable Africa. So, like I said, we have people like Marcus Mosiah Garvey. We have other Pan-Africanists like Julius Nyerere, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania. We have other Pan-Africanists like what's the name of this man? Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso. We have Patrice Lumumba of Congo. We have this man in Guinea. That he what's his name? Ahmed Sékou Touré. We have Ahmed Sékou Touré of Guinea. There are a lot. I can go on and on and on and on. There are lots of Africans who have. We have Robert Sobukwe of South Africa of the Pan-Africanist Congress. So it's a lot of people. It's a lot of African forebears who have given us the intellectual basis upon which to build our continent.
Okay, so another question I have is, last week I had S.L. Kathan on this show, and we discussed multipolarism in today's world. And one of the things that, during our discussions, one of the things that came up was that there doesn't seem to be an African identity. And I think for Africans to be able to unite, to work towards our goal and our shared interest, there needs to be an African identity. So I wanted to ask you, what role do you think that having an African identity plays in Pan-Africanism? Because if you ask the average African now what they think about being African, right? Other than, black is beautiful, those kind of things. But there doesn't seem to be a pride. Because do you understand? There doesn't seem to be a pride in what Africa is. So let me know what you think about the African identity and its role in Pan-Africanism.
I mean, the core of Pan-Africanism is you embracing your African identity, literally. When you look at the work of intellect that Stephen Bantu Biko of South Africa did in his book, I Write What I Like. I mean, anyone who is interested in Black consciousness and Pan-Africanism, Black consciousness is a prelude to Pan-Africanism. You have to be aware of who you are, your place. You have to be aware of your place in the world, the place of your race in the world. This awareness will inevitably lead you to find with people of your kind, and we have Pan-Africanism. So like I said, Black consciousness, embracing the African identity, goes beyond Black. We all know Black is. I mean, being blessed with melanin is such a divine honor to be blessed with melanin. You can't say you're a Pan-Africanist and you are cherry picking which African identity you are supposed to embrace. You think have this classist European, capitalist mindset. We now, we have structured our society based on white supremacist terms. Yeah, I mean, we do not have an African understanding of the world. What is an African understanding of the world? Apart from regurgitating all the bullshit that you read from CNN and all these fake news, what opinion have you formed on your own as an African, looking at the world from a third person point of view? Okay, looking at the world as an African, what is my place? How do I, in what role do I play, either in the destruction of this world or in the elevation of motherland? So, like I said, it is an intellectual journey. Apart from an intellectual journey, it is a didactic part. On this quest of self-awareness, it's not going to be within the four walls of the classroom. It's not going to be in some capitalist institutions. It's going to be your own personal inquiry into your existence as a race and why you need to be here. What role are you playing in the future of the world? And so, like I said, it's the embracing the wholeness of being an African beyond Black is beautiful.
Amazing. There's so much we can dive into on that, but because of time, right? Maybe we will have another set of conversations, but because of time, let's just lay the groundwork for Pan-Africanism before we delve into all of these other topics. So another question is, why is it important for African nations to work together in today's world of great power politics?
They should not work together now. They should not work together.
Did you hear me?
Yeah, I did hear you.
Okay.
I'm like, they should not work together and see what is going to happen to them. Like Kwame Nkrumah said in his book, Africa Must Unite. He was very clear. There was no political correctness. Nkrumah was very clear. He said, you unite or you perish. You unite or perish. There are no two ways about it. Because Ghana, as a very tiny country in West Africa, does not have the geopolitical clout to speak for itself in a world of nations. In a country where you have imperialist powers that are refusing to relinquish what they have looted during colonial period. It's impossible for a little state like Ghana to have such a political clout, so much so that we can speak on behalf of Africa. That's why I always preach that we need to have a one African integrated government. See, people don't understand how the division of Africa is very detrimental to our existence, literally. Because Africa has now literally been, during the Cold War, it was very acute during the Cold War. Africa was polarized into the Soviet region part of Africa. We have the Mengistu Elmeriam of Ethiopia, who was literally a crime state of the Soviets. We had Mobutu Sese Seko, who literally looted his country blind with the support and anointing of the West and ruled for 31 years. We had a very notorious criminal like Blaise Compaoré, who killed his best friend, Thomas Sankara, and ruled from 1987 till 2014, after which he was chased out like a nuisance that he is by a bunch of elegant and proud Burkina Faso people. So our division has polarized us and conscripted us into warring factions of geopolitical influence. We have the pro-Russia. We have the what is Russia? Russia is also a European country that is also fighting for its interests. I think we are having, people have to really understand that nobody can be pro-African more than the African. Russia cannot be, Russia cannot be. Russia cannot like you more than you like yourself. So that's why I preach that it's very important that we should have a one integrated African government. I'm not saying that we should have one African president. I'm saying one African foreign policy, a Pan-African parliament, Pan-African, one African foreign policy that is speaking for the 54 states of Africa. These Europeans, they have the fucking European Union. I'm sorry, they have the European Union. They have the European Union that speaks for Europeans. In fact, Europe is so integrated. From Dublin, you can enter any part of Europe. From France, you can enter Spain. It's very, very easy. In fact, it is easier for the white man to travel within Africa than an African to travel within Africa. That's how much the geography of colonialism has been so entrenched in our today's politics. So it's until we get rid of ourselves of these, colonial symbols, colonial, that has been emblazoned in our institutions, until we have a Pan-African Renaissance, a kind of Pan-African revolution, a socialist revolution that is going to integrate Africa, steer us collectively towards our desired path, really. So, I think that's it.
Okay, but what do you think are some of the challenges that have limited us from achieving this African unity? Like, what are some things that have stopped it?
One thing I can say is Africa has an illusion of freedom. Like Frantz Fanon, that Martinican intellectual that wrote Wretched of Years. He said, we have flag independence. You see, the colonizers exited through the front political doors and came back in through the back economic door. So there is no independence, really. Look at the Sahel. We're having one military coup after another. It is because the political situation in those countries necessitated that, because there's still foreign intervention in independent African states. We still see how Francophone African countries are still spending CFA franc, colonial currency for French Africa, that is being designed, monetary policy, fiscal policy being controlled in Paris. Look at Paul Biya of Cameroon. That guy has been president of Cameroon since 42 years, longer than I've been alive. He has been president of Cameroon for the past 42 years. And in France, they have elections like every 5 years, every 4 years. But they are supporting a fossil who has held his country by the jugular for the past 42 years. So African people in our collective as a masses, there is no governmental representation of African people. We have a government that represents the elites and the interests of foreign multinational companies. All these our leaders, they are in cahoots with all these international institutions. So we really don't have forward-thinking, socialist, Pan-African oriented governments in Africa. We have not had them yet. We did have them. We had somebody like Thomas Sankara. Within the space of 4 years, he revolutionized Burkina Faso. We saw what he did, and we saw what happened to him. Say all you like about Gaddafi. In fact, you can. I'm not a fan of Gaddafi, but you can say all you like about Gaddafi. Let us look at the material conditions of the Libyan people. Forget that he's a dictator. I don't know why people are defining democracy by the handouts. I don't know why people are defining how to rule themselves by whatever the State Department says. But let us look at the material condition of the Libyan people. They had one of the highest per capita income in Africa at the time Gaddafi was killed. And we saw what happened to him. He was executed. We see what happened to him. He's a dictator. That was a smoke screen for a bigger agenda. The bigger agenda was to arrest Africa's development. Gaddafi was not the problem. Gaddafi is very irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. It's not about Gaddafi. It's about arresting, seizing all these, all these mineral infrastructures. In fact, Libya is now a war-torn failed state now, where we have rival international armed groups fighting over mineral resources. That place is now a failed state, thanks to Obama and Hillary Clinton and these criminals who are trying to teach us about human rights and democracy one way or the other today. So, it's until African people, African youths actually rise, because I'm not. See, when people ask me, I support violent revolution. Really, I'm sorry. I'm not a fan of liberalism, and I am on the left. So, I support African people in mass taking charge of their destiny. I support African people being in the front seats of their development, not these criminals like this guy in Cameroon, not the Bola Tinubu's, not people like that, not people like this guy of Uganda, Museveni, that's been there for 42 years with nothing to show for it. So, like I said, it's until we African people look at the state of Africa now. Africa is a new colonial client state. We're still not free for colonialism. We're still tied, until we see these things and sever the relationship that we have with these parasites. Not until then do we, when I say parasites, I mean our national bourgeoisie, the Bola Tinubus and co and their cohorts.
That's amazing, because it's one of the things that the more you follow geopolitics, the more you realize that many leaders across Africa are just puppets, sitting in to serve the interests of outsiders. So let's get into another question. How can Pan-Africanism, because one of the biggest issues we have in Africa today is insecurity and this whole terrorism thing, thanks to people like Obama, what he did in Libya in 2011. But I want to ask, how can Pan-Africanism help address issues like political instability, economic dependency, and even the global marginalization of Africa? Does Pan-Africanism play a role there?
Like I said, not just a feel-good ideology. It's not just a feel-good ideology. No, it's not just for the aesthetics. It's actually a program. You feel me?
Your video is off. I can't see. I don't know if it's your network or something, but your video is off. Okay, yes, it's back on now.
I said Pan-Africanism is not just a feel-good ideology. It's not just the aesthetic, red, black, and green feel-good ideology. No. It's a program. It's an actual program. Burkina Faso, Niger, Guinea. They are so politically integrated that they are fighting insecurity, a coalition of troops from Burkina Faso, Niger, and then Mali. They are dealing serious blows to the insurgents. And this is a landlocked part of Africa, and they are dealing very brutally against these insurgents, the Boko Haramists and all these people. So, like I said, Africa should not look at themselves in isolation from one another. Ghana is not different from Nigeria. Benin Republic is not different from Nigeria. It's just that France colonized one place and the English colonized the other part. That's just, Africa. See, I need people to go back into African architecture really and see how Africans were living pre-colonial era, how we were living. Now we live in a very fucked up world that we have fences, individualism. We didn't have that. It was a community, so integrated, a community, a very, very integrated community. Not now that you could be dying in your apartment and your neighbor doesn't even know where you are. Nobody cares about you. But it was a very integrated community that babysit each other's children and all of this. So it is until then that we realize that our indigenous way of life plays a role in our future. Our indigenous way of life plays a role whether we're actually going to go extinct as a race or not.
Because that's quite.
Because you can be indigenous and be sophisticated. You can be indigenous and be sophisticated. All this phone, this iPhone I'm using, all these things that we're seeing, this sophistication of culture over the years, refinement and sophistication of culture over the years. These people they've had the prototype, they've had the idea of these things maybe 500 years ago. But sophistication of culture continues to evolve. But Africa, our culture has been arrested. We do not think ourselves as human beings unless we imitate Europeans. So we have abandoned our way of life, our upbringing, our cultural understanding of the world. We have thrown into the trash. Embrace individualism, white man way of thinking. A black man now has a fucking gate. Nobody does. He built a very tall fence. That's the white man way of living. Africans do not live like that. We are Africans. We're a community. That is why Ubuntu is the central Pan-Africanism. I am because you are. I see myself in you, literally.
No. How can African countries leverage their collective resources and markets to achieve economic independence and growth?
Look at this country. When Nkrumah was alive, there was a particular speech that he gave at the United Nations where he said, Congo is the heart of Africa. If Congo bleeds, Africa bleeds. With the enormous mineral resources that Congo has, there's no reason why such a sorry state. In fact, Congo should be the shining light of Africa. Literally, Congo should be the shining light of Africa. Look at the vibrant use. Look at the mineral resources. Look at where it's located. It's looking at a very strategic part of the world. So there's no reason why Congo is in such a storage state. However, there's a solution to what is happening there. Like I said, Pan-Africanism. Now, we have many peacekeeping missions in Congo that are just at the behest of the emperor in Washington. There are no African solutions to African problems, and that is why we are in such a cycle. We are just going round and round and round and round and round and round. We are not achieving any result because the person that's put us in the problem that we are is still the one telling us what to do. We do not have an understanding of the problem, talking of the answer. So it's until we approach our problems in an African-oriented way, not by whatever the rubbish they write in, in New York Times and their newspaper. Pan-African understanding of the world. Do not then integrate economically. Do you know how Africa will be when we have a United African States, United States of Africa, with a United States from Congo, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, South Africa, with the diamond and gold and oil from Angola, with the resources in Libya, Do you know how much we could achieve? We could conquer the world. Really, we could conquer the world. But we have been so partitioned, we have been told that you are Ghanaian. You have no business with the Nigerian. Oh, you are Nigerian. You should get a South African. All the xenophobia is the symptom. The problem is marginalization of South Africans. It's the marginalization of black South Africans. The problem is that white minority rule is South Africa today. The problem is South Africa was never independent, and black people in South Africa are just transferring aggression they could have transferred to their actual enemies, which are the white settlers, to the actual black people. So it's until we get the problem, we'll just be fighting the symptom. You have malaria, you're just using headache, you're using paracetamol when you could actually take injection. So it's until we actually, have economic integration that we can actually excel.
So yeah, one thing that has been on my mind is, usually when we talk about Pan-Africanism, it's easy to say we are not where we're supposed to be because our leaders are puppets or our leaders are not visionaries. But my question now is, what can we as individuals do, right, to get us started on the right path? Once we can begin the journey, our leaders will come in when they come in. But we as individuals, what are the things that we can do to push Pan-Africanism in Africa today for African unity?
The best way you can push something is to be that thing. It's not just pushing it as if it's an outer part of yourself. Oh, I'm pushing it. No, it's to be that thing. I'm not just a Pan-Africanist, like it's a different part of me. I'm a Pan-Africanist because I am a Pan-Africanist. It's me, it shows I'm not just a Pan-Africanist because I'm black. It shows in how I see the world. It shows in how I dress. It shows in my takes on my opinion on so many things. It shows in my choices. My choices are Pan-African influence choices. So the best way to push anything is to be that thing. People will see you and be like, yeah, this lady's on some shit. I think I like that. We don't really necessarily have to put people in the class and we say, okay, this is it's to be that thing. It's to be that thing. People like Mandela, we influence them today because of the passion. Because of their passion, their dedication to the struggle. They were the struggle. They embodied it. So it is until we actually embody our Africanness to such an extent that we're going to influence. Ideology is very, very, very like a wildfire. People ask me that, how was Hitler able to capture everybody in the 1930s in Germany? However poisonous as Nazism was, it was a captivating ideology. It was an ideology. They lived it. They embodied Nazism. They embodied fascism. You see their mannerism. You see they were so fascistic. However, we do not want to be fascist. We are anti-fascist. In fact, we are going to lead a struggle against fascism. But we should embody our Africanness. We should embody. We should feel comfortable with our Africanness.
That's very deep. That's very deep, because at the end of the day, you can't sell what you don't believe in. You can't give what you don't have, right? So you're very correct. Okay. What role does the African in diaspora play in Pan-Africanism? Because sometimes, especially for me, who discusses geopolitics from an African perspective, right, I tend to look just within the continent. Well, in your opinion, what role does the diaspora play in the Pan-Africanist movement? And also in Africa's development?
Well, you mean Africans in diaspora, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't see them as Africans. Well, for example, African. I don't think there's anything like African. Well, I don't think there's anything like African American. I think that there's just Africans in America. They are not our cousins. Those people are not our cousins. Those people are not our cousins, like people usually say. Those people are us. They are literally us. So the diaspora, like my comment to say, we need to build a bridge. A bridge must be built that links Africans in the continent and Africans in the diaspora. We should ignore divisive elements like this guy. What's the name of this guy? This Tariq Nasheed guy, who is telling people that no, you are not an African. Even though they have visible African characteristics, tell them no, you're not an African. You are an indigenous American. We should not engage in such identity crisis. We should understand that those people are us, and people like Malcolm X have given us the blueprint with the Organization of Afro-American Unity. The bridge was built and linked Africans in the diaspora and Africans in the continent. So we should continue the legacy of our ancestors and really.
Okay. So my final question now is, what message do you have for any African listening to this? Because the people who listen to my show, they are really passionate about Africa. They are really passionate about not just the well-being of Africans, but actually to change the story of Africa. So what message do you have for them about Pan-Africanism in today's world of great power politics?
I think there has been a very, very interesting change in tide in recent years, right? And it's been very, very impressive. Not only is African youth, young people generally, the Gen Z, you can see what the Gen Z did to Ruto in South Africa. They forced them to take they forced them to take the very they forced them to take down the very ridiculous finance bill. You can see what the African youths, not African youths, the youth of the world are doing for Palestine. You can see what they're doing for Palestine. There's been massive pressure on the international powers about the place of Africans in the world. For example, now there was a reason why TikTok was banned. TikTok was banned because people, especially young people, are beginning to have a consciousness. There's been a change in consciousness. People have started to see a change, a different opinion from what they see on CNN. Like I said, CNN is probably the most. I don't know, as a journalist myself, I don't know how to classify. I don't watch CNN. I don't watch that rubbish. People are starting to say that there's people, the way we live, there's a different. We've been living a lie, literally. People were watching in real time how buildings were being leveled in Gaza, how American taxpayers are funding a genocide. People are beginning to negate that banality of evil that happened in Nazi Germany. That millions of people killed behind Hitler, and they killed behind him, and it led them into the doom. So there's been a change in consciousness for African youth. So you cannot change anything ad hoc. You have to be intellectually armed. There are numerous books to read. There are numerous things to do. There are numerous things you can engage yourself into. This world is just the world of materialism now. That capitalism has pervaded the world. That people feel like, if you're not drinking Benz, if you are not drinking champagne, and spending lavishly in all these clubs in Paris, you've not lived life. There's more to the world than all these status symbols. What about your pride as an African? What about your dignity as an African? We do not understand that as an African, we are all interconnected. When Trump said they are eating the dogs, they are eating the cats, Haitians were eating the dogs, they are eating the cats, he did not only expose Haitians to harm, he exposed every single black person in America to harm, because these white people can't tell who is Haitian, Nigerian. That's to tell you how white people see us. So what happened to George Floyd in the United States can happen to you. George Floyd is you. You are not immune to racism. In fact, maybe you could rise through the bureaucracy of capitalism. Maybe you could buy yourself some shield and protection from racism. But one day they're going to remind you where you come from, like Kemi Badenoch.
You just took that name out of my lips right now.
Yeah. No matter how you twerk for the powers that be, no matter how you virtue signal, they're going to remind you that you are a Negro from the jungles of Africa. They're going to remind you that. So we should understand that we are not immune. When I read it in the news, when I read that an African has been shot dead, racist violence, African school shooting, if it's an African that shot a school, they'll be like, oh, criminal, lock him up. But if it's a white man, if it's a white boy, he has mental problem, let's take him to rehab. Oh, so it's unusual. But they are the most violent people in the world. History is our evidence. This is the most violent. I don't understand how black people in America have a PR of being the most violent community when they exist in the most violent country on earth. This is a country that was napalming people in Vietnam unprovoked. This is a country that supported apartheid governments in South Africa that was slaughtering the necks of our people. So we should understand that our struggles are still interconnected. We are not immune to all the problems happening in the world, especially when we have a lunatic like Donald Trump, who is currently occupying the White House and who currently has access to nuclear weapons. I can't imagine such a colossal mistake. You hire someone as Mercurial, as Donald Trump, in charge of your nuclear weapons. Well, let's say a few goodbye before we are blown into a nuclear war in a few years. So so we have to understand that our struggles are interconnected, and we should see ourselves in each other, really.
Okay, just to round off, I do you have some books, any suggestion, like books to read about Pan-Africanism to help me and as well as the people who watch this show develop our
Well,
consciousness about what
well, I mean, there's a lot of books. There's a lot of books. But
okay, like your top five. Let's say your top
my top five. I'm currently reading one right now because I'm in my studies. I'm reading one.
five.
Okay,
Okay.
let me pick this. I think it's a very good book.
History of South Africa.
Yeah, The History of South Africa by Tula Simpson.
Okay, I'm not seeing it clearly. Okay, Tola Simpson. Okay.
Yeah,
All
The
right.
History of South Africa. Yeah. So, but let me give you my top five. It's very hard to choose, really. My top five. I Write What I Like by Stevie Biko.
Okay.
That book is, I don't know. I think that's my number one. I think that book is like 180 pages, 150 pages. Very short book, but it's very, 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 very important. I Write What I Like by Stevie Biko. Of course, Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. In fact, all Frantz Fanon works, Wretched of the Earth, Black Skin, White Mask, And there's this book I read recently, The Kaiser Holocaust. Germany's forgotten genocide in Namibia. I think I have it somewhere here. I think it's somewhere there. The Kaiser Holocaust, Germany's forgotten genocide in Namibia. It talks about how Germany is a very recent country. Germany came into existence in 1871. After the first unification of Germany from Prussia, 1871. Because Germany came into existence in 1871, it did not participate in the slave trade. So it was now determined to participate in the colonial period. So Germany came into existence during the colonial period. That was why Germany was one that hosted the Berlin Conference in Berlin, Germany. It was led by Otto von Bismarck. So Germany was also voracious about having colonial empires like their equal counterpart. Because this is a recent country, 1871. It started acquiring colonies in Cameroon, in Namibia, in some parts of Togo. So it talks about the atrocities that Germany committed in Namibia and how the legacy of those atrocities shapes Namibia today. Because today, Namibia is just like South Africa. With the white people in South Africa, which is in this case the Germans, they hold over 70% of the economy. It's just similar to South Africa. So another book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. I don't know how to pronounce it. Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire is a Brazilian intellectual. And each other one. Let me see. And yes, the autobiography of Malcolm X.
Mhm.
The autobiography of
Okay.
Malcolm X.
Okay, I'll try to find them and put the links. If you can even help some of the names, just in case the network is strong. But I'll try to find them and put the links in the description so that you guys, if you want to purchase the books, you can buy them.
The Loot.
Am I seeing Loot?
The Loot, yeah.
Yeah. The Loot.
The Loot. Britain and the Benin Bronzes. This book was written by Barnaby Phillips. It's actually written by a white man, Britain. Barnaby Phillips. Talks about how Britain invaded Benin Kingdom in 1897, stole all their artifacts, exhibited it in their museum. It was just the story, the whole story of all the events in this book. And how so stupid Nigeria got. You see, don't get me started about this book because it's actually very provoking. So there's a very insightful part of the book that actually that actually sits with me. So there's a particular review of the book. The person said the Benin bronzes. He said visiting the British Museum and seeing the Benin bronzes is like visiting relatives behind bars. Visiting the Benin Museum and seeing those Benin bronzes is like visiting relatives behind bars, because these things are actually stolen properties from my people. Stolen properties from my people. But now it's being held in your museums, and I'm being told that, in fact, if I take it, I'm a criminal, I'm the thief, not the person who actually invade a sovereign kingdom, massacred all the people there, burnt villages, exiled the king to Calabar, where the king later died, stole all the artifacts. I mean, it's such a very, very painful historical tragedy that we should not allow these criminals to shape our world. We shouldn't allow them shape our world. And that's why we're having crisis. It's until we have indigenous solutions to problem. There are indigenous solutions to problem. Oh my goodness, capitalism has ruined the world so much that we do not understand that there are indigenous. Our ancestors were not living this way. The world was less altered than it was like this 500 years ago, but we've polluted the earth. Those who were living those days, they understood that our role in the world is not to conquer nature. Our role in the world is to live side by side with nature. So it's until we understand this relationship between the human being and nature that we are supposed to coexist. It's not supposed to be a relationship of conquest. It's supposed to be a relationship of coexistence. It's not a kind of relationship that you be polluting the waters because you want to drill oil for capitalist consumption. And that's why we have poverty in the world today. So it's until then, like I said, these books are very illuminating read for the African consciousness.
Thank you so much for sharing them. I'll leave them. I'll look for them and also leave the links to them. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Obgeni Adémola, it's been a very insightful conversation with you. So much that you said that normally I would not have thought in that direction, but you have awakened a certain consciousness in me. And I'm sure it's the same for anyone who watches this program. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope that we can have you more often than just once.
Pleasure is mine. I hope we catch up some other time.
All right, then. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah.